Welcome and thank you for standing by. Currently, all participants are in listen-only mode. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now I'd like to turn the call over to your host for today, Crystal Jimerson.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our series opening webinar on measuring poverty using Census Bureau data. I am Crystal Jimerson, a training specialist here at the U.S. Census Bureau. I want to thank you for joining us today for the topics, tools, and data to use, strolling through the Census Bureau data webinar series. These webinars are a great opportunity for you to learn from our experts about how to access the Census Bureau data, tools, and resources. If you wish to follow along, take a moment now to open an additional browser. You can register for any of the webinars by visiting census.gov/academy. Now, before I introduce today's speaker, let's go over a few important housekeeping rules. As mentioned earlier, this webinar is being recorded. For your convenience, it will be uploaded to our Census Academy site with all supplemental materials relating to the webinar within 30 business days. We welcome written questions during the webinar. Please submit your written questions using the Q&A panel, which is at the bottom center or the right screen of your WebEx screen. Please take a moment to locate that now. Once you found the Q&A panel, make sure you choose all panelists from the drop-down menu. This will ensure we see your question. Also, we ask that you do not include any personal or business identifiable information with your question. We suggest keeping the chat panel open as we will provide key links and other resources throughout the webinar. Keep in mind you won't be able to respond to the chat. That's for us to send out links or other resources related to the presentation. My colleagues will be monitoring the Q&A panel, and as time allows, we will answer your questions directly through the Q&A panel, or we will share your question with the presenter to respond to during the webinar. If we do not get to all the questions with the response during the webinar, we will post the questions and responses with the webinar materials on the census.gov/academy site within 30 business days. As you know, we are in a virtual environment and sometimes technical difficulties might occur. So if you are having issues, try a different browser such as Chrome or consider logging out and coming back into the session. If you are having audio issues, try selecting the computer audio or calling into the webinar via phone. Now I would like to introduce our speaker, Brian Glassman. Thanks again for being here today. Brian, you may begin.
Thank you, Crystal. So yes, I am Brian Glassman. I am the chief of the Poverty Statistics Branch, and I'm really happy to be here. We in my branch, my area, we spend all year putting out data, working on reports, working on all the data all the surveys that come into us, making sure that we're putting out the most accurate data. And we don't want that to just go out into a void. We want people to be using that data and know how to access that data. So this is a great opportunity, I think, for me to reach out to users like you. Okay, so for today, basically, you can kind of think of this in like three different areas. First, I'm just going to define poverty. I want to make sure we're all on the same page on what we're talking about when we talk about poverty. And as you'll see, we do measure poverty in a couple different ways. I'm going to talk about the different data sets we use, because we don't just use one set of data to measure poverty. We have some different surveys that go out that allow us to measure in different ways. And then some links and some data tools available that will allow you to access the data and just look at poverty in different ways. So as I said, we're going to start with just defining poverty. To do that, we have to think about two different things, really. We have to think about resources and the resources that people have, and the needs side. So they're kind of two different sides. So as I mentioned, there are two different measures. We have what's called the official poverty measure, and I'll talk about what that means, and the supplemental poverty measure. In both of these measures, as it says here, individuals are considered poor if the resources they have are not enough to meet basic needs. Okay, but we have to define, okay, what do we mean by resources and what do we mean by basic needs? That's different for each of these measures. Okay, so first, resources. One basic question is, in a house, apartment, whatever, who shares the resources? So you can make different assumptions about who is sharing the resources in a household. So you see on the left-hand side for the official poverty measure, we assume that everyone in a family is sharing the household, and we define family by people related by birth, marriage, or adoption. The SPM uses a different measure of resource sharing units, and that includes also foster children and unmarried partners. Right, so if you have an unmarried partner in the official measure, they're not going to be included. To just kind of give you a more visual concept of what's happening, let's say that there's some number of people that live in the household. We have an unmarried couple with a child. Excuse me. We have a mother of the woman with a child, and we have an unrelated individual, all living in the same house. So how do we decide who is sharing resources in order to define what we mean by who could be in poverty in this household? So if we're looking at the official poverty measure, we're talking about family. So people residing together and related by birth, marriage, and adoption. That would really only be the mother and the child, and then the mother of the woman with the child. The unmarried partner and the unrelated individual would not be in that family unit. So in this case, you could have 3 different units that could possibly be in poverty or not in poverty, based on what resources they have. For the SPM, in contrast, we would include the unmarried partner. The unrelated individual would still be a separate unit, but now we've expanded this resource sharing unit to say, well, we think this unmarried partner is also sharing, their income or whatever, resources they have with this family unit, and we think that should be included. Okay, so as I said, that's kind of the resources side. What do people bring to the table in terms of income and whatever resources they have. There's also the need side, and on the need side, we call it a poverty threshold or a poverty line, and that's the minimum level of resources that are adequate to meet basic needs. And that's a very kind of vague statement, and we have to define what that means. So in this case, we define it in 2 different ways. The official poverty measure goes way back to the 1960s, and in 1963, they took 3 times the cost of a minimum food diet, and we said that is your minimum basic needs. And we use that same level today, just updated for inflation. So it's been it's that same food diet times 3 up to $2,023 or 2020. I forget what year it is. $2,025 for 2025. The SPM, on the other hand, uses a different market of goods. So if you kind of just look at the picture, it also uses food, but it doesn't multiply the food basket by 3. It includes clothing, shelter, utilities, and telecommunications. So it's saying this basket of goods is what is needed for a basic person to be above poverty, right? If you have enough money to afford this basket of goods. Whereas the official poverty measure is saying you need to be able to afford a minimum food diet multiplied by 3. That's kind of the extra money you need for all this extra stuff that you might need to live. Okay, so different levels, not just of resources or who's covered by resources, but also different levels of need. Okay, the thresholds are also not may or may not be the same. So for the official poverty measure, people are constantly surprised by this, but it is the same throughout the country, right? So the official poverty threshold is the same in New York City as it is for rural Mississippi, right? In 2023, the threshold for 2 adults and 2 children was $30,900, no matter where you lived. Okay. For the supplemental poverty measure, there's a couple different things. One, there's different level of need, whether a rental unit, home with a mortgage, you have a home that you've paid off. And it also varies throughout the country. So I'm going to go on to the next slide to show you what I mean. If you look on the left, we have a bar graph. So this is all for people or households, families, these resource units with 2 families and 2 children, just to give an example. And for 2 families with 2 children, as we mentioned, the official poverty measure is $30,900. And that is the same throughout the country. And that is the same for owners with a mortgage and renters. You see, for the supplemental poverty measure, this is just overall an overall national average for these bar graphs, you see that the owners with a mortgage and the renters are pretty significantly higher than the official poverty measure, about $6,000 to $7,000 higher, whereas the owners without a mortgage has a pretty similar at a pretty similar level as the official poverty measure. However, this is not the same throughout the country. So if you look at the map on the right, you see that the lightest color there is under 30,900. So anything that's the lightest color, that is areas that have poverty thresholds that are less than the official poverty measure. Any of the darkers are gradually, as the color gets darker, areas that have poverty thresholds that are higher than the average. And you can kind of see maybe what you would expect. You kind of see on the different coasts where we know that there are higher costs of living, you see higher thresholds, right? It takes more money to meet the basic needs because things are much more expensive. Okay, so we talked a little bit about who is included, but we didn't say what is included in resources. So this is for the official poverty measure. Resources include this list: wages and earnings, Social Security, unemployment, retirement, interest and dividends, and public assistance, which could be a number of different things. But generally, we're talking about cash public assistance. It does not include taxes paid, tax credits. So this is all before tax. Stimulus payments, if we're talking about, the COVID era stimulus payments, or any kind of non-cash assistance like SNAP or Medicaid or things like that. So you add up all these resources, you get that official poverty measure threshold, which for the family of 4 was 30,900. If the resources are above the threshold, the family is not in poverty. If they're below the threshold, the family is in poverty. Okay. For the supplemental poverty measure, we take that same starting resources, right? Just flipping back to this slide real quick, we have this house. Let's call that the same starting resources, but then we add a bunch of resources here on the left and we subtract some expenses on the right. So we add stuff like housing subsidies, SNAP, utility assistance, school lunch, WIC, which is women. I forget the full name of it, but the program for women and children, and then tax credits. And then we subtract stuff like childcare expenses, work expenses, taxes that you pay, any child support that you pay, and medical expenses that may be out of pocket. So once we do that, we get a new resource level. We compare that to whatever the threshold is in your area. Are you a renter? Are you an owner? Where do you live in the country? That tells us your threshold. Again, if you're above the threshold, you're not in poverty. If you're below the threshold, you are in poverty. So in both cases, whether we're talking about the official measure or supplemental measure, all we're doing is adding up whatever the definition of resources is, and we're comparing it to whatever definition of this basic needs is. And if you have enough resources to meet your basic needs, you're not in poverty, according to our measures. Okay, so to just kind of give you a little bit more, not information, but just to make it a little bit more detailed, I'm just going to give you a quick example that just shows how these poverty measures may differ. So let's say that you're looking at a family of 4 living in Akron, Ohio. Just pick that at random, and you're renting. If that was the case, and let's say you have a pre-tax, right, before you pay any taxes, your income, money income is $35,000. Let's say you net taxes, which means is positive, so you're getting some money back, is $1,700. You get $1,000 worth of SNAP, and you pay work or childcare expenses, whether that's for childcare or for travel, of $12,000. So that means your SPM resources in that case would be $25,700. Your official poverty measure resources would be $35,000, right? So the official threshold, as we already talked about in 2023 for a family of 4, is $30,900. The SPM threshold for a person renting an apartment in Akron, Ohio would be $30,000. All right, so we already said, the pre-tax money income is $35,000. That's what we use for resources for the official poverty measure. That's greater than our official threshold. So this family in Akron, Ohio would be considered not poor according to the official poverty measure. However, their SPM resources, which in lots of cases we consider, well, this is what you actually have to spend, right? Your taxes are gone, your work child expenses, that's already been paid. You do have the SNAP. So we're talking about that 25,700 might be more reflective of the resources you actually have. That's less than the SPM threshold, which means this family is considered poor. So it's very possible that the OPM, you're considered poor according to one measure, you're considered not poor according to another measure. And hopefully it's not getting overkill, but I'm just going to provide one more case study and then we'll move on. So let's say we have the same family of four. They have a pre-tax money income of 30,000. Net taxes, again, they're getting a return of 3,200 and a SNAP value of 1,200. So then their SPM resources are 34,400. Still, the thresholds are the same. We still have a official poverty measure threshold of 30,900 and an SPM of 33,763. So then the pre-tax money income is 30,000. That is less than the 30,900. So this family would be considered poor according to the official poverty measure. However, due to their net taxes and their SNAP income, their SPM resources is 34,400. It's greater than the SPM threshold. So this family would be considered not poor under this example. Okay, so it could go either way. You could be considered poor according to the official and not SPM, or according to the SPM and not the official, or, which is more likely the case, you're considered poor by both standards, or you're considered not poor by both standards. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about, hopefully not too much detail, about what the official poverty measure is, what the supplemental poverty measure is, right? We use different resources and different thresholds to use them. You might ask, okay, well, okay, you're telling me two different poverty measures. When do I use one? When do I use the other? And that is a great question. That's a question we often get. And I think the best way to answer it is kind of look at this table. On the left-hand side, the official poverty measure has a really long-term trend at the national level. We have data available from 1959 using the same method. So you can look at how poverty has changed from 1959 to currently we have 2023 data available. So, and 2024 data will be available in September. The supplemental poverty measure only currently goes back to 2009, right? So if you want a long-term trend, you really want to look at the official poverty measure. The supplemental poverty measure is only going to give you about 15 years, where the poverty measure can give you 60 plus years of data. So you get a much longer term trend that way. Secondly, for the official poverty measure is really used for program eligibility. The supplemental poverty measure is what we call a research measure. It is used. It is a measure that is often reported when people are reporting on the news. When the supplemental poverty measure, or when the child tax credit was passed, there was lots of stories in the media about how the poverty decreased or was cut in half for children. That was the supplemental poverty measure. The official poverty measure basically didn't change that year because it doesn't take tax credits into account. So supplemental poverty measure is often reported on. It's often used in research, but it is not used for program eligibility. So when we're talking about federal and state governments using this to allocate funds or any kind of program eligibility, that's official poverty, not supplemental poverty. Okay, so on the right-hand side, the reason that we often argue that supplemental poverty measure is useful is because it really gives us this more complete measure of resources. It's after tax. It includes government assistance, right? So it lets us know, or it gives kind of what we think is a more accurate representation of what people actually have to spend. And because it includes all that stuff, if we take away one of those things, we can kind of see the effect of each of those programs. So we can see the effect of taxes and credits on poverty. We can see the effect of government assistance on poverty. And that is something that we produce in our report every year and is one of the most popular figures that goes around. So we can see, okay, well, how much does SNAP affect poverty? How many people does that keep out of poverty? How many people does medical expenses put into poverty? So like those are really useful things that you can't really do with the official poverty measure, but you can do with the supplemental. Secondly, we have this geographic variation, right? Official poverty measure, people have a hard time believing that it takes the same amount of money to be poor in rural areas as it does in big cities that have very high rents, very high food prices. So this allows for the geographic variation, which people might find a little bit more palatable. All right, just before we kind of go on to other things, I just wanted to show you a figure that comes out of one of our reports, and this is just showing the supplemental poverty measure versus the official. And don't worry too much about the official plus. The reason we have the official plus is because it generally doesn't include in unrelated individuals under the age of 15, but so we can compare them, we include them. And so you can see here, this I was mentioning that dip in 2021, that was due to like the tax credits and the economic impact payments, which didn't affect the official poverty measure. But you can see generally the supplemental poverty measure back to 2009 has been above the official. Okay, so that hopefully was not too quick and dirty of a discussion of what poverty is according to the Census Bureau, how we measure it using the official poverty measure, which is really not our definition. That was a statistical directive. That's kind of like, that's how we have to measure poverty. And then the supplemental poverty measure of this research measure of how we think resources and thresholds actually look like for people. So the second thing I want to really do is talk about our different data sets that are available. Excuse me. So I'm going to go through 4 different data sets that we use at the Census Bureau, and then we can talk about like how we access that data. So I have all the acronyms here, but I will go through what they all mean. So first we have the CPS ASEC. That is the current population survey, that's CPS. That's the longest running survey conducted by the Census Bureau. It goes back to 1948. And the annual social and economic supplement, that's the ASEC part of it, that's collected pretty soon actually, in February, March, and April. And the 2023 sample, so the 2024 sample will be collected this spring. The 2023 sample was collected last year. And it consists of about 90,000 addresses. And I'm going to give you this just so you have an idea of the size of these surveys. So this goes out to about 90,000 households in the United States. And that goes back to I think it's the early 1960s. I'm forgetting about that. I'm forgetting that at the moment. But we have poverty measures, as I mentioned earlier, back to 1959. And as a result of the sample size, which is big, but not as big as a data set you'll see in a second, we recommend that you really look at national level estimates. So you can look at national level estimates using this, and you can look at different it by different race, different education levels, all kinds of different cuts that you'll see in our reports. But if you want to look at like states, we really recommend, based on the size of our survey, to use a 3-year average, or to use the American Community Survey, which I'll talk about in a second. And the CPS ASEC is the official source of national poverty estimates. So we have a report that comes out every September. That it's the poverty report. It gives our national poverty numbers using this survey, and it is our official source of what poverty is for the nation. However, it's really only national level, right? We don't do using this. We don't do state or anything below the national level. Okay, the ACS is the American Community Survey, and this is a nationwide household survey. It's designed really. It was really designed to provide timely data between decennial censuses, right? Because we were really only getting granular level, like low level data at decennial census time, so every 10 years. And we were like, well, we really would like this data more often. So this was kind of created for that purpose. It has an annual sample size of about 3.5 million addresses. Because we remember CPS ASEC, 90,000 addresses, ACS 3.5 million. So a very large survey. It has less detail. So the CPS ASEC is much more detailed questions. For example, when asking about income, there are about 50 questions about income on the CPS ASEC. In the ACS, there are 8, right? So it's less detailed, but it's much larger in size in terms of number of people, which means that we can look at a lot lower geographic levels. We don't have to just look at the national level. It's a rolling survey administered throughout the year, meaning that people are surveyed every month, January through December, and they're asked, for income at least, they're asked about the previous 12 months. We do both a 1-year and a 5-year ACS. So 1-year ACS, that's released every September. And you can get data in that we release data in that for all states and all populations greater than 65,000. So in 2022, and I think it's 2023 released estimates for 837 counties. So there are 3,144 counties in the U.S. I think at that time, and so it's not nearly there's a lot of small counties in the U.S., but it does release data for counties as well as states. The 5-year ACS is basically we're taking 5 one-year ACSs and putting them together, and then there is some reweighting, so it's not exactly an average, but you can kind of think of it as kind of putting 5 one-year ACSs together. So for instance, in 2023, you had the 2023 1 year, and then you had the 2019 to 2023 5-year ACS. So it included 2019, 2020, 21, 22, and 23. And that's large enough, right? Because you're doing 3.5 million times 5, basically, to include estimates for every area in the US. So all congressional districts, every metropolitan area, all counties, all places, and all census tracts and block groups. And if you've never looked at or worked with a census tract and block groups, they're basically like your little neighborhood. So it might be your street, a block group might be like your street and maybe a surrounding street. It's very small areas, and we produce poverty and income estimates for that, which is really great. Now it's a 5-year estimate, so you're not it's looking at like a larger point in time. Can't really say that this is exactly what's happening in 2023, but you can look at these really, really small geographic levels, which is really nice. All right, the next one is the SIP. This is the Survey of Income and Program Participation. This is a household survey that began in 1983, and it's designed as a continuous series of national panels. Basically, what that means is it's a longitudinal survey, meaning that we follow the same respondents over time, generally for 4 years. So respondents are in the survey for 4 years, but that means that we can see what happens to people from 1 month to the next. I'll talk about that in a second. It has an annual sample size of about 50,000 addresses. Okay, so it's the smallest of the 3 surveys that we've talked about. And people are interviewed between January and June. Okay, so you can kind of guess that because it's even smaller than the CPS-ASEC, really all we're talking about is national level estimates here. However, it allows for measurement of chronic and episodic poverty. So what does that mean? So chronic poverty is, right, maybe you're in poverty the entire time that you're in the survey. Episodic poverty is maybe you're in and out of poverty, right? So there may be people, it's possible that there are people that are interviewed in the other surveys, CPS, ASEC, and ACS, that they're in poverty at the time that they're surveyed, but maybe it was just like, they lost a job, they went into poverty, and then they got a job and they got back out of poverty. Well, you can see that in the SIP. You can see people are going into poverty and coming out of poverty, and going back in and coming back out, or just taking one dip in. And so that's the great thing about the survey. You're able to follow the same households and see what is happening to them over time. And it also has, it says detailed program participation. I don't want to forget that. It has a lot of detail, like much more detail on program participation than the ACS does. And finally, I want to mention SAPI. This is the Small Area Income and Poverty Estimates Program. So this is not a separate survey, but what they do is they take the ACS 1-year data and they mix it, or not mix it, they create model-based estimates with this data and administrative data, which is just lots of other data that they have access to. And they create model-based estimates, which really what that means, and for the purpose of what we're doing, what that means is it allows them to release 1-year estimates for all states, counties, and school districts. Remember back to what I said about the ACS, the only way we can release data for all counties and school districts is using the 5-year ACS. Well, SAPI has created this model-based income and poverty estimates, which allows them to release 1-year estimates for counties and school districts, which is really fantastic. And it goes back to 1995. Now they're releasing on an annual basis, and they release it for like different age groups, as you see there. Okay, so kind of like what I said before on the last part, like when to use each poverty measure. I just went through these 4 different data sets. Okay, when should we use those? I said a little bit about this as I went through, but it's a good thing to like just kind of, I think this is just a great slide to just have in your mind, or to be able to go back to, after the webinar, to think about when I should use each data set. So if you want national poverty rates, you want official poverty rates, and you want supplemental poverty measure rates, you should use the CPS-ASEC. That's released annually in September. The latest data available is 2023. Next September 2024 data will be out, and it's in a report that has both official numbers and supplemental poverty measure numbers, and it also releases microdata file, which means that if that you can access the individual level data and create different kinds of measures yourself. Right? Look at if there's a particular thing you're interested in, you say I want to really look at high school graduates official poverty versus supplemental poverty. You can do that. If that's not available in the report or on tables that we produce, you can do that yourself with the microdata. If you want state and sub-state poverty rates, and if we're talking about only areas over 65,000 people, you should use the one-year ACS. Again, the latest available is 2023. That comes out in September. We do have the SPM with that. However, the SPM is currently not released in September. The 2023 ACS SPM is set to be released probably in the next month or two, hopefully next month. And we're working on getting that into like a release schedule that's closer to that release time. But hopefully in 2024 we can have it released by the end of the year. If you want state, county, and school district official poverty rates at the 1-year level, right? Remember, you can look at county and school district official poverty rates at the 5-year level using the ACS, but if you want it at the 1-year level, use SAPE. That's released annually in December. They have the latest available is 2023. There is no SPM included with that. It's just the official. If you want poverty estimates for all areas, remember we said all areas regardless of size, even like really small neighborhoods, use the 5-year ACS. That's released in December because there's a little bit more work that has to go into that after September. The latest available is this 2019 to 2023 version, and we don't have an SPM for that. So we only have an SPM for the 1-year level. And then finally, if you want this ability to follow people over time, you want monthly estimates. I think I said that, but I just want to make sure, this in the SIP, you can get annual estimates, but you can also get monthly estimates of poverty, which is really, really neat. Then use the SIP. That is released annually in the summer, I believe, the end of June, but definitely early summer. And the latest available currently is 2022. It's a little behind the other surveys, but 2023 will be out in about 6 months. And that does not include the SPM currently. We are working on doing an SPM in the SIP, but that is not yet available. Okay, just a few resources that I'd like to point you to. We have 2 web pages that are listed here. One is the top one is our poverty webpage. So I'm just going to show you real quick. We're not going to go through it too much, but it's kind of neat. It has, I'll go by the featured stuff, but it has different things you can look at. So it has tables. Let's go past the news. All right. It has publications. So it has our official reports that we put out. It has data. So if you want to get data tables or anything like that, you can go to the data section. And it also has working papers. So working papers are research that we've done in our area that is on things related to poverty, but is not maybe like things that we're using to produce in the like official reports, but still things that can be very interesting for data users. I'm not going to click on it, but there's also a supplemental poverty measure page. So that poverty page has kind of everything, but we also have, just because we have so much stuff on the supplemental poverty measure, it has its own page, which is great. And I highly recommend going to that as well if you're interested in the supplemental poverty measure. Again, it has publications, it has working papers, and it has data. We have an ACS data platform. Okay, so I mentioned these reports that come out, but we also have this platform that's data.census.gov. And this you can go to, and it has a search bar. So you can just search for, say, poverty. You search for poverty. A bunch of tables are going to come up. Hopefully you guys can see this on your screen. And then you can kind of look at what you want to look at. It's poverty in the past 12 months, selected characteristics, blah, 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 blah. There's all kinds of different things you can look at. And then we'll just click on it real quick. If we look at poverty status in the past 12 months, this is a great table. I think I have it actually linked a little bit later. You can look at, I like to go, rather than the numbers, look at percent below poverty level. So this is for 2023. If you look at the top, 12.5% of the people in the US were in poverty. And then you can see there's different links up here. So there's something called geos. And for geos, you can go down and click on lots of different areas. So there's block groups, census tracts. Those were those small areas I was talking about. Counties. So if you click on states, then it has the option of picking an individual state if you just want to know the state that you're in, or you can do all states. Okay, so just a lot of different ways that you can get data here. And this is all from the ACS. So everything on, not everything, but a lot of the stuff on data.census.gov is from the American Community Survey. Also, there is a report that has everything in counties and census tracts. Just to click on that real quick, it is a persistent poverty report. And it's persistent poverty in counties and census tracts. And really, all this is doing is it gives you, well, there's a report that goes through a lot of this, but you can also see a list of census tracts and counties that have had poverty higher than 20% for the last 30 years. So if you want to look and say, what counties, what census tracts have just persistently, constantly been in poverty, what neighborhood, what areas have had high poverty rates for the last 30 years, we have a list of those along with this report. There's microdata access. And as I kind of mentioned, microdata is basically you have the access to the individual data. Like you're not, it's scrubbed of like the important information, right? You're not going to see names, addresses, or anything like that. But you're going to see the actual individual level data. You can see, have all the important variables like income and race and education and age. And so you can look at the data and do, and it will have poverty variables on there. So you can look at the data and do your own investigations into like what is available. So I put stuff, there's this MDAT site. So this is one where it has more kind of a drop-down menu and you can select different ACS. So it has American Community Survey 1 year and 5 year. It has the CPS, there's that economic supplement, that's the CPS ASEC, but it also has a lot of other CPS supplements. I'm not going to go through them, for this. And then it also has some SIP data as well. So you just pick it, select what year you want, and go to next, and then you can kind of scroll through and get some of the data, download the data there. Then I just have some links that I'm not going to click through, but just for your perusal, I believe the slides are going to be posted afterwards, so you can take a look at those on your own. But the second link here under microdata is the ACS microdata. So if you want links to the ACS public use files, you can get that. If you want links to the supplemental poverty measure. So basically what this does, that third link, is it takes those ACS public use files and it adds the supplemental poverty measure to it. So on that second file, ACS microdata, you're just going to have official poverty measure data. You're not going to have the supplemental poverty measure. On the third file, you will. And then link there, that would be linked to the SIP data. So if you want to access the SIP microdata, you could go to there. And then finally, the SAPI estimate. So as I mentioned, this is the small area income and poverty estimates. They have a data tool where you can look at a different map and look at how poverty looks at throughout the U.S. And then there's also this. Well, I don't know why I didn't update this, but because they did release the 2023. So you have the 2023 state and county estimates, and that's just a list of all the states and all the county and their poverty estimates. All right, so I went through and I defined poverty. We discussed data sets. The last thing I want to do is just point out some data tools that are available for your use that we think are very helpful for data users. So first of all, I kind of showed them on that poverty page. We have 3 reports that we put out. These are annual reports. So for the CPS ASEC Poverty in the United States, that's the official poverty that we release every year. So that link would take you to that report. It has official poverty measure. It has the supplemental poverty measure. It compares the two. It looks at a bunch of different breakdowns: race, education, employment status, disability status. There's a bunch of different breakdowns that it does in that, and makes comparisons both to previous years and between the official poverty measure and the supplemental poverty measure. Highly recommend that report if you haven't seen it. Plus, there's a lot of data tables that go along with it. The ACS, we also produce a report for that. We do produce national. But we really focus in that report on the state and metropolitan areas because that's using 1 year of ACS, so it doesn't have county, it doesn't have all the counties, so we really only focus on like the large metro areas. So if you're looking for sub-national data, that is a great report to look at. That is only the official poverty measure included in that report. And then the third, the SIP, we have the monthly and episodic poverty, and that comes out every year. The last one is 2022, as I mentioned. The 2023 data will come out in, I think it's June, July, and then we'll have a new report updated there. We also have a bunch of tables. Like this is, I will click on this just to show you that there are tons of tables here that have detailed information. So if we just see poverty status by age and sex of all people, family members, and unrelated individuals. We have people under 18, by household or number of children, working family members. I'm not going to go through all this, but there's lots of different breakdowns that you have on that page. Similarly, we have historical poverty tables that can show you what poverty looks like all the way back to 1950. And you see, again, tons of different tables here. What is it, 21 tables where you can look at different kinds or poverty at different breakdowns throughout the US, and that's all using the CPS ASEC. Data.census.gov, I already kind of clicked on this. That was S1701. That was that table that I showed you that had poverty rates, just to show you again. That's data.census.gov. S1701 is a great table to use. If you type in poverty, that's the first table that's going to come up, so you don't have to remember S1701. Just type in poverty in the search bar, that table is going to come up. And I showed you the national poverty rate, but what I didn't show you is all the breakdowns, right? So you have age, race, a number of different races, educational attainment, employment status, work experience. So, okay, so you have a lot of different areas that you can look at. You don't need to go to the microdata for that. It's already available on data.census.gov. We also recently put out this poverty rates by survey. And I just want to show you this real quick because I think it is useful and it's something that we get a lot of questions on about, like how do the poverty rates, relate to each other. And what we have here is we have poverty rates for all people, and then for the three different main age groups that we use: under age 18, 18 to 64, and 65 and over. And it has the official poverty rate for all three surveys: the ASEC, the ACS, and the SIP. You see, well, we don't have data for 2023 yet for the SIP. And so it gives you the poverty rate plus a margin of error. So you can kind of think of that as like a give or take, so for the ACS, it's 12.5, kind of give or take 0.1%. So it's a margin of error plus or minus. And so there you can kind of compare the different surveys. We do have the SPM for the CPS ASEC, and that's because it's kind of an official product that we put out in our main report. The ACS SPM, we're kind of trying to get to that level, but it's not quite at that level yet. And as I mentioned, we're still working on an SPM for the SIP. I'm hoping to one day have official and SPM in this table for all three surveys, but we will be updating this table, as data comes out. So come June, we'll update the SIP, and then come next September, we'll update the CPS ASEC and ACS. So this will always be updated, and it's located. A link to this is located at the top of the poverty page. So if you go to the poverty page, you'll see a link to that anyway. And then the last tool is a new thing that we've just put out that I think is one of my favorite things. I didn't do it, or I didn't create it, so I don't take credit for it. There's someone in my branch that made it. But basically, what it does is it shows you supplemental poverty measure data. This is using the CPS ASEC for all people, and then for different breakdowns: age, sex, race and Hispanic origin, and educational attainment. But then it has a drop-down menu that allows you to look at a lot of different things. So currently we only have 3 years of data here, but you can look at 3 different years, and we're going to update this yearly. So next year we'll keep we'll keep the 3 years that are here, and we'll add 2024. But then you can look at different percentages of the threshold. So what that means, 100% of the SPM threshold, that's like the regular poverty threshold. 50% is like, well, what if people are, we call that sometimes deep poverty, right? What if people have even less than half of what it takes to make basic needs? And that shows you the number. Or what if people, what if we say we think that the poverty threshold is too low and we think it should be higher? What do people have that have 200% of the poverty threshold? And that shows you the numbers. So you can kind of toggle this to what you want it to be. You can also select a program or expense to basically see the effect of. Exclude is one way to put it. Well, first of all, let me put this back to 100, so we're looking at like the actual poverty threshold. And then let's look at Social Security, just because that has a big effect. And you can see what it does is it shows you what the original poverty threshold was, which was 12.9%. And then this 21.2% is what if we didn't have Social Security? Then it says the poverty threshold would be 21.2%. So basically, having Social Security decreases poverty by 8.3 percentage points. So we get to see the effect of these programs. And you can see that for the most part, it's for 65 years and over, as you would expect. So you can do that same thing for all these different programs, which is really neat. And then finally, the last button you can look at rates, or you can look at counts, right? So if you'd rather not look at, well, I don't care about the percentage of people, this says Social Security keeps 27.6 million people out of poverty, right? And that's a huge number and an important number. So this, I think, is a really cool data tool that we're excited about. And it just because it gives you the data and allows you to look at what you want to look at. All right, so again, that link is there. It's also on the Supplemental Poverty Measure page. Supplemental Poverty Measure page. So if you go to that page, there's a link to this tool, and it might be also linked to on the poverty page as well. But yeah, highly recommend playing around with that. I think it could be a lot of fun. Okay, so just to kind of sum up, as I mentioned, we define poverty in 2 ways. However, there are other ways to measure well-being. You might be thinking like that might not be the be-all and end-all. I put something together called the Multidimensional Deprivation Index, and that's just really kind of bringing together things where you could be deprived in different things like health, or the neighborhood you live in, or economic security. We could look at like Gini indexes and percentile ratios. This is income inequality. Like, yeah, everyone might be, we might not just care about how different incomes are. And then there's the resilience estimates, and that's a newish program that we put out that basically is looking at how resilient areas are to disasters. Just as a recommendation, what are the best places to get help if you just had one place to look? I think if you're looking for SPM information and you're looking for national poverty rates, go to the CPS ASEC report. I had that linked on the top page. It's always kind of at the top of our poverty page, and it's really the most cited report out there. If you want state and sub-state poverty rates, go to data.census.gov. That's a really great resource. Just as a caveat, it only has official poverty data. There's no supplemental poverty measure data on that tool. And then contact us. So it's not the most useful email address, but our poverty branch email is this sehsd.psb.list@census.gov. So we are always happy to help. We have it's not an unmanned email address. When we get questions to it, we do respond to it. So we're happy to help. This is data that we, kind of pour our heart and soul into. We feel very strongly and we believe very deeply in it. So we're very happy to help data users, and we're very excited when people are using our data. So we're definitely responsive. So once again, I'm just going to leave this up for a second. It has the Poverty Statistics Branch email. I also am putting my email on there. You can email me directly. I'm the chief of the branch. It's possible that if you email me, I might, have one of my members of my staff answer your question. But if I can help, I'll be happy to help as well. So thank you. I appreciate the time, and I'm also happy to answer any questions that there may be.
Hi, Brian, it's Jolie, and everyone who's putting your questions in the chat, thank you. Please know we are typing as fast as we can, answering them, and they've been coming in fast and furiously.
Okay.
So we have a few minutes. Some basic ones I think would be helpful for many people. Where can I find statistics on the number of percent of people at various percentages of poverty level for a county?
For county. So again, on data.census.gov, that I showed it, but I didn't go into it. That S1703. So if you go to data.census.gov and you type in S1703, and there's a link on the slide to it. It has different percentages of poverty. So it has 50%, it has 100, and then I think it has 150%. sorry that I'm not remembering exactly the percentages, but it has different percentages. And then from there, you'd have to go to Geo to select counties. So you can do that. And if you have any questions about that, like how exactly to do that, definitely reach out to me.
Okay. Can you clarify how the minimum food cost is calculated? This says in regard to the recent updates to the Thrifty Food Plan. I don't think we can go that granular, but in terms of minimum food costs for the official poverty measure.
Yeah, so the official poverty measure, basically that hasn't changed since the 60s. So we're still looking at kind of like the minimum food diet, and we're multiplying that by 3. And then we're really just, so we're not adjusting what is in that food plan. We're just updating that for different price levels. So it's just updating basically by the price level each year. And that is done because it's under Statistical Directive 14. We're kind of we were basically told how to measure official poverty, right? This is not something that we decide or we can change. That is the benefit of the supplementary poverty measure. That's something that we can have input into and we can make changes to improve over time.
Thank you, Brian.
Sure.
Now, let's see if you can comment about what is the likelihood that families are considered poor by supplemental poverty, but not official poverty, or vice versa?
I don't know if I can comment directly on the likelihood. I would say that it happens. Like there, we do, we can look at people that are poor by one and not the other. And I would say that it's a, I don't want to give a, it's a couple percentages. It's not nothing. But the majority of people, the vast majority of people, are either poor according to both or poor according to neither. But there is a subset of people that are poor according to one and not the other. I'm sorry if that's not a satisfying answer.
No, I think that's fair given the different variables.
But I would say that I'm just sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. We are working on putting out some more information on that. We've been getting questions about stuff like that. So we are looking at putting out a paper in the, I'd like to say nearish future, looking at people that are poor according to one and not the other, and kind of what they look like.
Great. We got a couple of questions related to Puerto Rico.
Okay.
If Puerto Rico is included in SIP and SAPE program estimates.
That's a great question. It is not. So it is only, so we have the Puerto Rico Community Survey, which is like the American Community Survey. And for that, we do have data on Puerto Rico, but for the other surveys, we do not.
Great. One question, easy low-hanging fruit here. Does the 5-year ACS data come out each September?
It comes out every December. Yes. So I think the 1-year ACS will come out in the September, and then the 5-year ACS will come out every December, and it will just be kind of like 1 year updated, right? So next year will be the 2020 to 2024 ACS, 5-year ACS.
Here's another one. I'll give you one
Okay.
more after this, and then I think we're probably about out of time. Who is included or excluded in ACS tables, American Community Survey tables, that have a universe of population for whom poverty status is determined?
Gotcha. Yeah. So we exclude unrelated individuals under 15 in for the official poverty measure. They are not included, and that's basically because they don't have an income and they're unrelated, so they're not included in any other kind of unit. So we cannot kind of create a poverty status for them. We also exclude people that are in institutions, so like people in like prisons or jails or like nursing facilities where they can't work. Are also excluded from the poverty unit. There's also like people in like college dorms are not included either. So there are some people that are in what we call non-institutional group quarters. I hate to, I'm sorry to use those like specific, those terms, but basically we're talking about like people in like college dorms would not be included. But people in like emergency shelters, like people like that are experiencing homelessness and living in shelters, they are included, if that's helpful.
That is helpful. And the last one I'll put to you as we're getting very close to our 3 o'clock is, can I find the percentage of residents under the supplemental poverty measure threshold at the local level?
That is a great question, and I would say currently you can find it at the state level, and you can find it at what we call the public use microdata area level, which is kind of just a statistical area that is in states that makes up around 100,000 people, so that's not very local. We're working on making a county level estimate, but that would be the most granular, the lowest level of geography that I would expect. But I'm hoping to get a county level as SPM out in the nearest future.
Thank you, Brian. I think
Sure.
it's really important to clarify those geographies that are available, and the fact that you can search out that data also through our microdata access tool. So I think that I'm turning it back to our moderators. I believe that's it for questions for today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Brian, thank you for this informative presentation and then those data tools, that SPM data tool. If you would like assistance or more information on our data and our resources, we have an excellent team of data dissemination specialists across the regions who are available. You can request a training by visiting the Census Academy page at census.gov/academy. There you'll find other resources such as our recorded webinars and our data gems. Before we conclude, I'd like to thank everyone who played a part in today's webinar. We thank our audience for spending your time with us this afternoon. We are very interested in hearing from you on how we are doing. Please take a moment to fill out the evaluation that will appear when you exit the webinar. That brings us to a close, and we thank you again for joining us today, and have a great afternoon.